What up, legends? Welcome back to some more Black Ops 6.
At least I hope I still have some Black Ops gameplay saved.
But either way, it's all good because we're mostly going to be focusing on this. Treyarch posted a blog called Call of Duty Black Ops 6 Multiplayer: The Road to Launch. Now, by the time this video is going up, you guys have probably already seen this blog, but I wanted to share my thoughts on this because there are some really good changes in here and also, in my opinion, some pretty bad ones too. But right off the bat, before we Omni dive backwards into this blog post, I think it's really sick that Treyarch is doing this. I mean, the game isn't even out yet. We're roughly a month away from the Black Ops 6 launch, and they're already sharing a blog post that details a lot of changes that they've made to the game's multiplayer since both of the beta weekends. I just think that's really cool that they're doing that. I've talked a lot about how post-launch DLC and post-launch support is a massive driving factor as to whether or not the game is going to be good or not. So the fact that Treyarch is taking these steps and sharing this information with us, I think is super dope. But yeah, man, without further ado, let's get into it. If you guys do enjoy this video and you want to see some more Black Ops 6 stuff on the channel, make sure to drop a like, subscribe if you're new, and let's go. Okay, so right off the bat, they're talking about maps, and I think the reason why they're detailing this is because some people had complaints about the maps being too small in the Black Ops 6 beta, which honestly just kind of blows my mind. Like, am I going insane here, or are we just going to be running in circles? Because I could have sworn that for so many years, every time there are large maps in Call of Duty games, the community complains. And Treyarch is providing us with Black Ops 6, a multiplayer experience with 16 brand new maps that are mostly small and medium. I could have sworn that this is what we asked for. And some people are kind of freaking out over the fact that there's not going to be large maps and there's not going to be ground war maps. Now, I can understand being frustrated about them not wanting to move forward with the ground war experience, but I gotta be honest, it kind of seems like ground war as a game mode and that focus on 64 player experiences has kind of lost interest, at least around the Call of Duty community. I feel like people who transitioned from Battlefield games to Call of Duty, they were probably a little bit more fond of the ground war experience, but at the same time, I gotta be honest, I feel like Battlefield games can do that better. Now, granted, 2042 is a little bit of a mixed bag, but hear me out. I feel like Treyarch is doing this in anticipation of an upcoming Battlefield release. There's most likely going to be a new Battlefield game coming out in 2025, and I feel like them removing ground war is maybe in anticipation of that. They've kind of realized that focusing on that takes away from the core multiplayer experience that Call of Duty has to offer, and especially with competition from X-Defiant, I feel like they just need to focus on core Call of Duty multiplayer. On top of the fact that most of the Call of Duty community has asked for these sizes for the maps. And if you guys were curious about the other 8 maps that will be available at the launch of Black Ops 6 for multiplayer, these are going to be the 8 maps starting off here with Vault. I'm mostly going to focus on the minimap previews, but this looks like it's going to be a medium-sized map. If we look over here to Protocol, this was the training course area where you could practice your shooting and your Omni movement, and this is looking like a medium-sized map, maybe a little bit bigger than the last one. If we move on over here to Lowtown, this is definitely a medium-sized map with a lot of swimming elements. There's gonna be a lot of water on this map, as you can see outlined here in blue. Next up, we have a map called Red Card. This one could possibly be classified as like medium to large size. From the minimap overview, at least, this looks to be like one of the biggest maps in the game. This kind of shape is sort of reminding me of Overflow from Black Ops 2, but we'll have to see how it actually plays out. But if you're someone who's looking forward to larger size maps in Black Ops 6, I feel like this map could be for you. Next up is an absolute throwback. We have Vorkuta as an actual playable multiplayer map, which I think is sick. This one looks like it's going to be more of a small to medium sized map. We'll definitely have to see how these power positions will work out, like this little circular disc over here, and then also the watchtower over here. We also have Subsonic, which this definitely looks like a really small map. We have some crashed SR-71s or Blackbirds from the original Black Ops 1. It looks like a really cool map. I feel like this map is definitely going to be small, close quarters, and fast-paced. After that, we have Payback, and this one looks like it's going to be more of a medium-sized map, maybe a little bit on the larger side. Don't worry, it's not going to be like Stonehaven levels of huge, but it's definitely going to be a medium-sized map for sure. But then after that, we have a map that's not only 6v6 compatible, but it's the only map listed here that's also a strike map where you could play 2v2 gunfight. And if it's looking sort of familiar, it's because this map is Nuketown if Nuketown went boom. This is without a doubt going to be one of the smallest 6v6 multiplayer maps, and what's interesting is that I'm pretty sure Nuketown is not going to be available at launch, but this smaller version of Nuketown, which has been bombed, will be available at launch. And the only other thing I want to say about maps in Black Ops 6 is that we've seen this trend in recent Call of Duty games where they try to launch the game with either a set of new maps, or like with Modern Warfare 3, it launched with all of the OG Modern Warfare 2 maps, and then roughly around the time of Season 1 is when we got Shipment. And I think it's safe to assume that Black Ops 6 will be getting Nuketown around the time of Season 1. And we're starting to see a pattern here with the new Call of Duty games where the game will launch with a certain set of maps that they essentially want to force us to play until we get bored or tired of playing those maps, and then by the time Season 1 rolls around, they're going to give us what I call the grind map. For the Modern Warfare sub-series, that's Shipment, and for the Black Ops sub-series, that's Nuketown. But I gotta say, man, it's really interesting that we have this Warhead map. This is definitely a smaller version of Nuketown, at least it looks like it. And I feel like this map could be insane for trying to grind camos person just grinding XP at the start of the game. But when it comes to maps, there's only one other aspect or element of them that's equally as important, if not more important, because it determines the map flow, and that's going to be the spawns. A lot of people had complaints with the spawn system in the Black Ops 6 beta on certain maps, and yes, there was some crazy spawn trapping because, again, these maps are smaller, and as a response to this, Treyarch has left us with this. As a key companion to maps, we want to update you on the spawn system. One of the most important reasons we have a public beta is gathering spawn data from our players. Now that we have 2 weeks worth of player data, we've already made big strides in dialing in our spawn logic and identifying and resolving issues within the spawn system across the game for launch. Players may have noticed improvements to spawn logic throughout weekend 2 of the beta, and as new content comes into the game and we generate even more spawn data, we're always assessing our spawn system and will continue to make necessary updates to it through launch and beyond. This is definitely great to hear, especially since these maps are going to be smaller, they're going to be medium sized. There's potentially going to be more and more instances of spawn trapping and people getting bad spawns. And this is what I was saying right at the start of the video. It's great that Treyarch is giving us this information and letting us know, like, hey,
you little guinea pigs playing the Black Ops 6 beta, we collected millions of data points on you. We will fix those spawns.
Sorry, I got a little carried away there. Next up, we need to talk about performance. If you're struggling with performance, there is a certain pill that can, wait, different video. Our beta was immensely helpful in identifying and resolving some performance related issues. Over the course of the beta, we identified several areas that were impacting in-game performance. Some areas where we've made progress on performance include resolving general script errors, addressing issues related to our in-game user interface, as well as overall improvements and fixes to our asset streaming. Now, notice in this entire paragraph, there was not a single mention of packet bursts, latency issues, extrapolation. Those were some of the biggest issues in the Black Ops 6 beta, and they've also been major issues in Modern Warfare 3 as well. And a lot of this seems to be directly tied to a feature called on-demand texture streaming. Now, this isn't like a super brand new feature for Call of Duty. However, there has been this push lately to try to force players to have on-demand texture streaming on. This allows your console or your PC to cache assets and to cache these textures over the internet while you're playing the game. Now, this comes with some pros and cons. The biggest pro to this is that you don't have to download a bunch of high-res textures, a lot of high-res assets, if you leave this feature on. And if you have a really good internet connection with no restrictions, no limits, this can potentially be a good feature. But if you're on the opposite end of the spectrum and you have a limited data plan, or if you're getting a lot of packet bursts or latency issues, then it could be tied to the on-demand texture streaming. I really do think that at some point we need to have the option to be able to download all of the high-res assets separately. You can still have on-demand texture streaming as an option, but we should also have the option to just download all of the assets right off the rip. If you've got the hard drive space and you want to just have the assets ready at all times, I feel like this is the better option for some players. They mentioned fixes to their asset streaming, but I feel like it's not perfect. And this really hasn't been an issue in past Call of Duty games, and I don't see why it needs to plague the new games. Just seems kind of weird. And they say here, a smooth game performance is paramount to the player experience, and we've been able to chase down sources of in-game, quote, hitching and to deploy major fixes since the close of the beta. We will continue working with experts across all disciplines to improve overall performance for launch and into the live seasons. And I really do hope that's the case, and I do think that one of the solutions for this could be allowing us to just download the assets. If a smooth game performance is paramount to the player experience, then I feel like we, the players, should have the ability to just download those high-res assets and not have to stream them. But moving on, we're going to talk about weapons next. There's a whole paragraph here about headshot damage in a nutshell. Overall, headshot damage in the Black Ops 6 beta was not that useful. It didn't have that much of an impact on the multiplayer. Treyarch is trying to find ways to make headshots more viable without completely breaking the balance of the game and ruining the time to kill. This is a very difficult balance to strike because in past Call of Duty games, with Black Ops 3 as a prime example, if players ran high caliber as an attachment, they could do significantly more headshot damage. And on top of that as well, Black Ops 3 had a pretty high level of default flinch, so you could flinch up into high cal headshots a lot. I feel like this is why Treyarch kind of strays away from giving really big headshot damage multipliers, and overall, I kind of feel like going into Black Ops 6, there should at least be a couple of weapons in each weapon class that can somewhat see a benefit from landing those headshots. We don't want good aim to be punished, and we don't want people to not try to go for headshots with certain weapons. I think a prime example of weapons that could be really fun to use that are high risk, high reward are marksman rifles that tends to have a pretty slow ADS and sprint to fire and slow fire rate as well, but if you land a single headshot, you could drop people. And you have to keep in mind too that it's going to be even harder to reward precision in a game where people can be flying all over the place with the Omni movement system. Next up, they have a little section here for bullet penetration. Bullet penetration is another system that we will be improving for launch. In general, players should notice fewer extreme cases of bullets doing far too much damage through certain surfaces, aka wall banging, while also not penetrating as expected through others. As an example, those pesky snipers behind the radar dish on Scud. Yeah, anyone that was camping behind the radar dish on Scud, for whatever reason, the bullet penetration, the potential to wallbang them was really inconsistent at times. So I'm glad that they're looking into that specifically. And it did feel like on certain maps like Gala as a prime example, it felt like you could shoot through some of those walls a little too easily. And then they just mention here more to come. They They say, of course, we continue to review data and feedback regarding general weapon, feel, and tuning, and we're always keeping tabs on overall weapon class balance in the context of our entire map pool, which I do feel like is an interesting thing to mention because obviously most of the maps at launch for Black Ops 6's multiplayer will be small to medium sized, which is why multiple times in my reviews for the Black Ops 6 multiplayer beta, I specifically mentioned that players who spam SMGs and spam the Omni movement will probably see the most amount of success because of the map sizes as well. Sometimes the map you're playing on its own can completely dictate how you play the map. As a prime example, in the Black Ops 6 beta, if I was playing 6v6 on the map Pit, I was more likely to want to run either a shotgun, an SMG, or pistols because those weapons will have the most amount of success on a map like that. Whereas if I was playing a map like Scud, I'd be more likely to want to use an assault rifle, an LMG, a marksman rifle, or a sniper because the map's a little bit more open and more suited for those weapons. So yeah, sometimes the maps themselves can actually dictate how players want to play the game. But yeah, some of the changes that they've mentioned here are improvements to fluidity of sniper ADS. Now, this is pretty vague, but it is nice to see that Treyarch is looking to make sniper ADS more fluid for sure. Sniping felt a little janky, a little weird at times in Black Ops 6, and I really do hope that they can improve this. It also says here, improved fluidity when swapping weapons during sprint and tac sprints. We're excited about this one.
Gotta be honest, I'm more excited about the fluidity of sniper ADS.
But they're excited about this one. Next up, it says reduction of weapon motion during crouch transitions. So maybe if you're teabagging too fast, the weapons might be moving too much. I don't know. But lastly, they say small lift to shotguns and targeted adjustments across all weapons to keep SMGs from overperforming relative to other classes. Thank you, Treyarch. That's a pretty big W. This is why I call them Rayarch. Again, I specifically mentioned in my reviews of the Black Ops 6 beta that SMGs by and large are just gonna have a field day with this game. And they're definitely gonna have to look at the other weapon classes and make sure that they can keep up. So this is some great news to those who want to be able to use a variety of guns in the game. Lastly, they rounded out here by saying weapon balance is an ongoing process and something we're working towards at every point in our live seasons. We'll be sharing specific details about balancing in our launch patch notes. So they already got more patch notes planned, dude. Let's go. Okay, but next up we're gonna talk about
movement.
Omni movement specifically. In a nutshell, they want to improve the third-person animations across every single type of Omni movement in the game, so that way what you see in first person matches what other players see in third person. I think this is really good. There was definitely some really weird movement tech happening in the Black Ops 6 beta. I think it was like the frog hop, where you could slide forward into a drop shot, but then jump backwards. I wonder if they're going to look specifically into that as well as supine prone, because there were just some odd, weird things that players were doing to try to like trick your brain into thinking you were doing something else. Like some people who were prone looked like dead players. So it's definitely good to hear that they're planning to tweak some of those things to make it look a little bit more predictable. They're also going to be making some adjustments to slide predictability and fluidity as well. They said during the second weekend of the beta, they increased the time before you could enter supine prone during a slide. Basically, they're trying to find a middle ground between the first weekend and the second weekend. It's not going to be too slow of a transition, but it's not going to be too fast either. It's just going to be right in the middle. They're also reducing the minimum time to slide after sprinting to try to prevent dead slides. Now, I didn't really have this issue. I feel like this does depend on your controller settings if you're on controller, but I do know that dead slides can happen depending on what settings you run. And then lastly, it says slight reduction to maximum slide duration, which basically means you won't be able to slide for as long. And we gotta keep in mind it says slight reduction. They're not saying exactly how much, but obviously you don't want the slide to feel useless. You don't want to be sliding like an inch. So hopefully it really is just a slight reduction. And lastly, they have some updates to intelligent movement. Now, personally, I didn't really use too many of these settings, so I'm just gonna move on to the next section, which I definitely want to talk about. It just says, and a few more, and honestly, I almost wish this section wasn't real, but we'll get into it. We're gonna start here by talking about the winner's circle. The first change mentioned here is shortened overall duration of the winner's circle.
Why?
No, seriously, like, why? What is the point of reducing the duration of the winner's circle? It wasn't even overly long to begin with. Now, they're not saying how much it was reduced by, but bro, if they cut this in half, like, what's even gonna be the point of the winner's circle? Especially after reading this next section, which I gotta put a trigger warning, especially for the Infinite Warfare enjoyers out there. To reduce emote spam, players in the winner's circle will now only be able to activate one emote. Ah! Oh my god, you guys hear that? It's the fun police!
Treyarch, how could you do this? We were just one mere step away from glory.
Oh, we could have had the infinite dabs, the infinite whips and nays, but now you can only activate one? Bro! F's in the chat, boys. F's in the chat. We were so close to having a perfect Call of Duty game. But in all seriousness, this doesn't reduce emote spam. This just kills the fun and the enjoyment of the winner's circle. I have so many clips, so many recordings of me and my buddies just spamming emotes at the end of a match and just laughing. It was so much fun. Just seeing our characters in unison shushing people or doing the other kinds of emotes and stuff. It was just good, plain fun. And I gotta be honest, we're gonna sort of dive a little bit deeper into this and why I feel like it was actually so much fun and why I think this system is honestly just way inferior compared to what we had in the beta. These two changes right here, in my opinion, discourage people from wanting to win the game. Because of the prevalence of skill-based matchmaking in recent Call of Duty games, I gotta be honest, I don't care about winning. And I do feel like a lot of players feel the same way, at least in public matches. Ranked play is a completely different discussion, but when it comes to just casual public playlists, I don't think a lot of people really care about winning anymore. It doesn't feel as good. It doesn't have that same impact. When you go to play other FPS games like Battlefield, X-Defiant, Halo, the gameplay loop itself and the way that those games work make you want to win the match. But with recent Call of Duty games, it doesn't necessarily feel like you want to win or that you want to do well because you know that skill-based matchmaking is going to punish you. This has been a consistent issue. However, with Black Ops 6 bringing back the winner's circle, especially a really fun one where you could spam emotes, for the first time in a long while, man, I actually felt like winning. I would try harder. I would get on those objectives. I would try to get the W because I wanted to shush people a million times. God damn it. It was so fun. It was actually just fun. And I gotta be honest, I do not like this change. I think this discourages people from winning. It makes the winner circle a lot less fun. Now, again, these are changes that are happening on the back end. We don't know exactly what this is going to look like. But if we can't just go back to the way it was working in the glorious Black Ops 6 beta, maybe we could find a middle ground. Maybe make the winner circle more like Black Ops 3, where it has a decent duration and you can use a couple of emotes. Maybe not infinitely spam them like it's Infinite Warfare or the Black Ops 6 beta, but at least let us enjoy the different emotes that we will earn in the game or potentially even buy, because you gotta keep in mind, man, you know that Black Ops 6 is gonna have some bundles and they could definitely create some very unique and wacky emotes to use, but it's not going to have as much impact and it's not gonna be as much fun if you can only use one per match. So again, my overall suggestion, my recommendation for this type of system is to either just revert it to how it was in the Black Ops 6 beta or try to find a middle ground where the winner circle still lasts a decent amount of time and players can use anywhere from like 2 to 5 emotes. That way they're actually getting some fun and value out of winning the game. Whew, man. Never in my life did I think I'd read patch notes for Call of Duty and get this heated about a winner circle, but this is the first time in a long while that I felt like I cared about winning in a random Call of Duty public match. And with this change, I feel like that's being taken away from me, and I just don't respond well to it, man. I really don't. But moving on, we do have some other decent changes. It says simplified the emote menu to make it easier to activate emotes in the winner circle and in-game, which is good. If they're making it easier to activate the emotes, who knows? Maybe you can activate more than one at the end of a game. But I feel like what this has the potential to benefit more is using these emotes in-game. The menu was a little convoluted, so hopefully that gets better in the full game. And then lastly, they mentioned improvements to fidelity and lighting. Now, I'm assuming that this is specifically fidelity and lighting to the winner circle itself, so we'll see exactly how that's going to pan out. Even though this next change isn't brand new, it's definitely a good one. They're going to be adding a kill counter. It says, by popular demand, we've added a kill counter on your HUD that will track your progress towards kills in one life medals, including those who are chasing the coveted nuclear medal and nuke kill streak, or rather score streak. We have this in Modern Warfare 3 and it's great. It makes it super easy to track what kind of streak you're on. Absolute W right here. Next up, for camera motion, it says we're reducing overall camera motion on sprints, tack sprint, and slide. Now, by default in the settings, I believe it sets to 100% in terms of the camera motion. I put mine down to 50%, so by default, mine was cut in half. But I think that overall, this could be a good change for those that might be getting motion sickness or they just get kind of disoriented from the Omni movement. We got some various changes to the kill order game mode. I feel like by and large, these changes they're making are geared towards trying to encourage the player who's the active HVT to go out and get kills instead of just sitting back and kind of really not doing anything. Next up, we have a pretty big nerf to Sleeper Agent. It says remove the time added when earning eliminations while Sleeper Agent is active. I'm not totally opposed to this change because look, I don't think that Sleeper Agent was designed to be this kind of field upgrade where you can disguise yourself as an enemy and then go on some kind of crazy nuke streak because the enemy team is just confused and they don't know what's going on. I feel like it was designed to be sneaky, to get around, to get people in those body shields, which I definitely really enjoyed doing. I'm not totally opposed to this change, but I feel like a good way to kind of counterbalance how heavy of a nerf this really is would maybe be to slightly reduce how long it takes to charge up Sleeper Agent, because honestly, if you're playing Team Deathmatch, you'll be lucky to earn this even once, unless of course you're running the perks that can charge it faster. But yeah, in certain game modes, it just feels like Sleeper Agent isn't nearly as impactful as it is in others. Next up, we got a pretty sick change to sim shots. They're going to be changing it from cooldown based instead of inventory based, which I think is a base change. You'll no longer have just like 1 or 2 stims and then when you run out, you run out. It'll now be on a cooldown like it's been, I think, in Cold War and Black Ops 4 as well. Quartermaster will also decrease the cooldown time, which is pretty sick. And this one is a pretty nice change to the combat axe, but it doesn't fix every issue that I have with it. It says resolved an issue where the combat axe would not deal lethal damage at the start of the round. They even say here it wouldn't be a Black Ops game if you can't hit those cross maps at the start of the match, which I do definitely agree with, but there's still a couple of potential issues with the combat axe that I really hope Treyarch looks into. The first is that trophy systems block combat axes. Now, apparently this was the case in Cold War as well. It's just been a minute since I've played and, seen and experienced that. But even then for Cold War, I don't really agree with the fact that the combat axe would get stopped by a trophy system. It is one of those situations where I guess we could agree to disagree, but I would like to see Treyarch at least give some kind of explanation as to why this is how it's balanced. Because in a lot of other Call of Duty games, trophy systems tends to just block lethal explosives, and tactical grenades. And the reasoning behind why throwing knives and combat axes still go through is because they require more precision, they require a higher degree of accuracy versus an AoE explosive or tactical. That's personally why I feel like they should bypass it, because if you're willing to run that and have to use more skill to take someone out with a combat axe, you should be rewarded for it and not constantly denied, because honestly, trophy systems, they're relatively easy to earn. And the fact that they can just shut down basically every piece of equipment in the game, I feel like is a little busted. And my second issue with the way the axe worked in the Black Ops 6 beta is that you could not throw the axe while diving. Now, I did mention in my beta review that I feel like they did that so that way people wouldn't get frustrated with the fact that it could be done. But overall, it does kind of feel weird, and it forces players who are going melee only or just using axes to have to slide all the time, which isn't necessarily bad, but it would be nice to be able to dive and throw the axe. That would definitely be an action hero Black Ops moment right there. And if we can't do it by default in the game, at least let us run a perk like gung-ho or dexterity that will allow us to do that, because it just felt a little off in the Black Ops 6 beta. In this section right here, they talked about moving some perks from perk 1 to perk 2 and vice versa. I'm not really gonna get too into that. But lastly here, they mentioned that they've updated the RCXD controls to be more like Black Ops 1, I think. It says updated to classic Black Ops view-based control by default, and they switched the detonation button from R2 to R1 so you wouldn't accidentally blow it up as much. Definitely sounds like some pretty good changes, because the RCXD in the Black Ops 6 beta did feel a little stiff, so this is a pretty nice change as well. And lastly here, they wrap it up by saying looking to launch. It says the studio and our partners are hard at work making sure that the launch of Black Ops 6 reflects these changes and many more. We'll be sharing more information in the coming weeks, and look out for more intel on the Call of Duty blog. And yeah, man, that's pretty much it for some of the big changes that are coming to Black Ops 6 going into the launch of the game. And overall, I want to say like 90 to 95% of the changes are looking pretty solid, but there's just a couple that I feel like they could definitely iron out and make better. But overall, after reflecting on the blog post, I feel like Black Ops 6 multiplayer is looking pretty good. But I want to hear from you guys. What do you think about these changes coming to Black Ops 6 multiplayer? Definitely let me know in the comments below. And with that being said, thank you guys very much for watching. I really do hope you guys enjoyed this little Black Ops 6 video. If you guys did and you want to see some more Black Ops 6 stuff, make sure to drop a like, subscribe if you're new. I'll see you guys later.
I've come. Train boat.